fun today? That's good, that's good. Well, our family would like to welcome all of you today. Thank you for coming. We lucked out with the weather. That was good. For Howard Farms to be selected to do this event is a great honor. We'd like to thank the President and his staff for letting us have this great opportunity. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Secretary of Agriculture, Dan Glickman.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I would say I was here about 3 or 4 years ago, and Congressman Minge had Lena and Tina here to greet me. I don't know if everybody knows them, but he promised to get them here, and it scared me, so I think he kept. They were wonderful, actually. But I'm delighted to be here, and it's an honor to be here with the President of the United States and Congressman Minge, and to see a lot of friends out there. And I know the President is going to recognize a lot of people, but there is one person in the crowd that I just want to pay special tribute to. When I came to Congress in 1977, he was a member of Congress, and he became a great Secretary of Agriculture and a wonderful friend, and that's my friend Bob Berglund over there. I just want to thank him. And I know there are other great Americans here that the President will introduce, but he has been a special friend of mine. We're here to talk about one of the most pressing issues facing this country, and that is our relationship with the world's most populous nation, 1.3 billion people, and that is the relationship with China and the importance of granting permanent normal trade relations with China. As I said, 1 out of every 5 people in the world lives in that country. And they're in the middle of extraordinary change. Incomes are growing, the consumer class is growing, and it represents an extraordinary opportunity for America's farmers and ranchers. For years, our access into that market has been relatively closed, but now China is preparing to open its doors by joining the World Trade Organization. And through the efforts of President Clinton, we've been able to negotiate a tremendous bilateral agreement with China that will eliminate export subsidies, that will dramatically reduce agricultural tariffs across the board, and will make it much, much easier for our products to get in, our farm products to get into the Chinese markets. And the stakes are very high for Minnesota, which exports more farm commodities than all but 6 other states. China is the world's largest growth market for soybeans. We saw some here at this farm. And China has agreed to phase out their soybean oil quota and to bind their soybean tariff at the current rate of 3%. After importing less than 250,000 metric tons of corn in 1998, China has agreed to allow the import of up to 4.5 million metric tons at a mere 1% duty. And by the year 2005, we estimate that China's going into the World Trade Organization and our permanent normal trade relations will add an additional $2 billion in total American farm exports each year. We know that things have been rough in American agriculture, and there are a lot of reasons why, but we also know that 1 out of every 3 acres of production in this country has to go into the export market. 2 out of 3 acres are used domestically, so we have to sell this. And the fact is that China remains an amazing market for America's farmers and ranchers. And there are a lot of other reasons for talking about this agreement, but I do believe that as you look at the future of American agriculture, and particularly America's family farmers and ranchers, we've got to have this access to all places in the world that we now don't have that kind of access to, whether it's meats, whether it's grains, whether it's oilseeds and soybeans, whether it's citrus, or all the great commodities that we produce. And I was in China recently. The President asked me to lead a delegation of members of Congress to China. We went to grocery stores. We saw American soybeans coming in. They like our products. Our quality is the best in the world. And we now have an agreement by which we can get our products into the Chinese market. And we don't want to let that opportunity go by, not take advantage of it, and let our trading competitors walk in and take those markets away from us. So that is the purpose of establishing at least with respect to American agriculture, the permanent normal trade relations. It offers a great opportunity to turn this agricultural economy around, along with good domestic support programs, but we also need those access into world markets. And again, this is the largest market in the world, and I think it provides a great opportunity for Minnesota's farmers and ranchers. Now I'd like to introduce a great leader for southern Minnesota. I served with him on the House Agriculture Committee in Washington, D.C. I don't know of a finer person, not just a congressman, but a finer person and a good friend of mine, and that's your Congressman, David Minge.
Well, thank you, Dan. Welcome, Mr. President, to Minnesota. To the 2nd Congressional District, to Scott County, and to Shakopee. We're pleased that you're here. We're pleased that you're here. Dan, I know you've been to Minnesota several times, and we were going to get Lena and Tina out here to greet you, but we had so many other good folks that we're going to save them for your next trip. You betcha. We've just had a little walk around the side of the farm site, and one thing that's impressive and coming home every week is seeing this farmland and realizing that we have some of the most productive farmland in the world right here in southern Minnesota. We're raising tremendous crops. We have the safest, the least expensive, the most dependable food supply in the world here in America. But our farmers are going broke. This is a sad situation. The United States has had a robust economy for the last 8 years, but America's farmers have not shared in this prosperity. It's not right. We've got to do something about it. And there are many different ideas, there are many proposals that are circulating, and this afternoon we're going to be talking about trade. And trade is certainly a key to opportunity for agriculture. But I think at the same time, all of us know that trade has controversial sides to it. And I know I've worked with the President, and he shares folks' concerns about workplace rights, workers' rights, the environment, human rights issues. All of these are important. At the same time that we have trade, we also want to make sure we have a good price. And with a strong dollar, we've gotten hammered, quite frankly, as producers here in the Midwest. And we find an international marketplace where about 8 countries view it as a dump for their surplus domestic production. And we're getting the dump price here in America's farms. So it's a complex matter, but certainly one part of it is to ensure that all trade opportunities that are available to us, or that are potential, are actually available to us. And this is a large part of what the China trade issue is about. In fact, I've seen estimates that $5 a hog might be the gain long-term for opening up China trade with a permanent trade relationship that we're currently going to be considering here in Congress. Well, these are all things that are important about trade. I'd like to just acknowledge a couple of other items. New Ulm, I hope, is well represented here today. Any folks from New Ulm? Up until Tuesday, President, you had an opportunity to go to New Ulm. But it's a little further away, and it couldn't be worked out. It's a great city. It's another very productive area. We've got a great farm here. I'd like to thank the Hauer family. And finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce one of the leaders here in Scott County, the chair of the Scott County Board, a member of the University of Minnesota Board of Regents, a lifelong resident of Scott County, a person who has farmed for his entire adult life here in Scott County, a real leader in Minnesota, the chair, again, of the Scott County Board, Dallas Boonstruck. Dallas?
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction, Congressman. I was afraid there he was introducing somebody else. I'm so pleased all of you could join us here today so that you can see for yourself that the decisions made in Washington do have a significant and lasting effect on small farmers like myself and medium-sized farmers like the Gene and Jerry Hauer families. So on behalf of the Hauers and all the farmers here today, I offer our sincerest welcome. The future of farming is dependent on our ability to export to new markets. Being able to sell my corn overseas is just as important to people with 400-acre farms like mine as it is to the larger operations. Currently, when I try to export my corn, I'm forced to compete with corn that is subsidized by the Chinese government. No matter how hard I work or how much I cut my costs, I simply cannot compete with subsidized corn. This agreement with China will eliminate these subsidies. I can't emphasize enough how important it is for American farmers to compete openly, fairly, and on a level playing field. Indeed, many other products will be affected by this agreement. Export opportunities for wheat, soybeans, cattle, pork, and other commodities will lead directly to higher prices, which in turn will benefit all of us. For American farmers to stay in business and stay profitable, we must open up markets in other countries. Farmers are very good at what they do. Given a chance to compete fairly, I am absolutely confident that American farmers will again prove themselves to be the most efficient, the most reliable, and the most productive in the world. China's a big country with over 1 billion mouths to feed. Just imagine the potential for American agriculture. As a farmer, it seems absurd to oppose China lowering tariffs, eliminating subsidies, and committing to fair trade practices. All we need to do is give them what over 130 other nations already have: permanent, normal trade relation status. For those of us working our farms each and every day, we need new markets like China. For us to simply hand over these markets to other competitors would be a terrible setback to family farmers, like so many here today. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary, and to everybody else I see here today, I know I speak for a lot of farmers when I say this. We're proud of the work we do. We're proud that we can help feed hundreds of millions of people all over the world. It is now my distinct honor and great pleasure to introduce the President of the United States of America, Bill Clinton. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, first of all, let me say I thank you all for coming out today, and I'm glad the weather made it easier on us. I want to thank Terry and Kitty and Gene Hauer for welcoming us to their farm. I think we ought to give them a big hand. We have invaded them. They managed to find enough unplanted space that I don't think we're taking their income away, but we certainly have invaded them today. Dallas, thank you for your introduction and for your example. Secretary Glickman, thank you very much for the work you're doing, not only on this issue, but on so many others to help the farmers of America. And I want to echo what you said about David Minge. He's a wonderful person. I have loved working with him these years I've been president. He is a straight shooter. although he never tells me any of those Norwegian jokes. He's always telling Glickman, so I expect to get my quota before I leave. And, but you should know that he is an extraordinarily attentive representative for you. I don't even know how many times he's mentioned some specific thing of importance to the people of this district and the people of Minnesota. But if everybody worked on me as hard as he has the last 7 years, I wouldn't get anything else done, because he really does a good job for you. I want to acknowledge in the audience today the presence of your Lieutenant Governor, May Shunk, the Attorney General, Mike Hatch, Treasurer Carol Johnson, your State Ag Commissioner, Gene Hugeson, I think that's the right pronunciation, and the Mayor of Shakopee, John Brecky, and his wife and beautiful daughter came out to the airport and met me. And I have here somewhere a beautiful crayon drawing she made for me, which I'm going to take back to the White House and save as a memory of coming here. It was really beautiful. I want to thank Bob Berglund also, as Dan Glickman did, and I understand the former governor of North Dakota, Alan Olson, is here. Welcome. I thank you for coming over. But I want to say a special word of appreciation to a man who's been my friend for 25 years and one of my favorite people in the whole world, our former vice president, your former senator, and my former ambassador to Japan, Walter Mondale. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I spent most of my early life listening to him speak. I'm just trying to get even now. I also want you to know that I brought with me 3 representatives of American agriculture today. When I came in on Air Force One, Scott Shearer with Farmland Industries, Nick Giardino of the National Pork Producers, and Susan Keith of the National Corn Growers, and they're out there working to help us. I thank them. I want to also say to the people who are here from New Ulm, I'm sorry that I couldn't come out to your community. I hope you'll give me a rain check. What really happened was, politicians, they always give you some sidewinding excuse. Well, I'll tell you what really happened. What really happened is I got to go back to work in Washington tonight, and I have to get back there an hour and a half earlier than I had originally thought I had to be there. I'm glad I got to come to the Howard's Farm, and I hope I get to come back there. We have a community in my home state of Arkansas called Ulm. It's near Elmira, which is near Stuttgart, which is near Slovak. And they go rice down there. I'm glad to be back in Minnesota. I was in St. Paul last week at America's First Charter School on my education tour, and I'm coming back in a couple of weeks to speak at Carleton College. If I come anymore, you will make me pay taxes here, I'm sure. But I've had a good time. I'd like to also acknowledge somebody who can't be here today, but somebody I really want to thank. Last week we had an astonishing event at the White House with President Carter and President Ford, and virtually every living former Secretary of State, former Secretary of, we had former Secretaries of Agriculture, former trade ambassadors, former Secretaries of Defense, National Security Advisors, 2 former Chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The whole history of the last 50 years in America was represented in the White House that day, except for Vice President Mondale's predecessor as ambassador to Japan, Mike Mansfield, our former Senate Majority Leader. He's 98 years old now. And when he was 15, he lied about his age to get in World War I. He's from Montana, and he would give a speech about as short as the one Terry gave today, sort of constant with coming from the northern part of the United States. But when we swore Fritz in, Mike Mansfield came, and I said, he was then, I think, 91 or 92. I said, he walks 4 miles a day. And Mansfield stood up in the back and he said, 5. So when he's 98, I said, Mike, are you still walking every day? He said, yeah, but I'm down to 2 miles a day. So I figure if we could all walk 2 miles a day at 98, we'd be doing pretty well. And I also want to thank your governor, Jesse Ventura, who there. He was the only sitting governor who came, and he's been just great to support this initiative, and I'm grateful for him. It's good for you, and it's good for America. And he's not a member of my party. He didn't have to do it, and it meant a lot to me that he showed up. And I hope it'll mean something to you, too. Let me see. When my staff was boning me up on getting ready to come here and briefing me about the history of this area, I learned that the first citizens of Shakopee were pioneers in Shakopee. I'll get it right if I may. Were pioneers in more than one sense. Way back in the 19th century, they were already trading with China. China was then the biggest and richest fur market in the world, and many of the pelts they bought came from here, from the shores of the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers. They found markets in China. Then trade was a small, though interesting, part of your past. It's going to be a much bigger part of your future, one way or the other. That's why I wanted to come here to talk about expanding trade in China, what it means for farmers like you, for states like Minnesota, and even more important than that, for the future of our children and America in this new century. In less than 2 weeks, Congress will vote on whether to provide permanent normal trading relations status with China. Now, PNTR, that's pretty arcane sounding, but what it means, as you've already heard, is that China will join about 130 other countries with whom we have trading that is governed by international rules of trade, plus whatever specific agreements we have with them. In 1979, when President Carter and Vice President Mondale and Bob Berkman were involved in opening our relationships with China, we signed a trade agreement. And ever since then, in 21 years now, every year we have granted them what used to be called most favored nation, but really was normal trading relations. We did it on an annual basis, and the idea behind doing it on an annual basis was we knew we had big differences with the Chinese. They were a communist country, we were a democracy. They had labor and human rights and religious rights practices with which we did not agree. We were trying to continue to work with them to resolve their differences with Taiwan on a peaceful basis. And it was thought that the Congress reviewing this every year would give Congress, and through Congress, the President, whoever that happened to be, some way of reviewing where we were with China, whether it was in our larger national interest as well as our economic interest, to review this every year. So now, I am proposing that we give them permanent normal trading status and let them come into the World Trading Organization, where they'll be governed by the same rules that govern us and all the other countries that are in it. And I came to tell you why I think we ought to make that change. The biggest benefit, as you have heard from Secretary Glickman, will probably go to the agricultural sector in economic terms. 1 out of every 3 American acres grows exports. We are the world's largest exporter of agricultural products. During the last 5 years, in spite of the Asian financial collapse and the terrible thing it's done to farm prices, we've still seen our exports nearly double. If you look at gross cash receipts, trade means about twice as much to America's farmers as it does to the economy as a whole. Minnesota is 3rd in soybean exports and production, 4th in corn, feed corn, 7th in overall agricultural exports. In 1998, Minnesota sold $2.4 billion in agricultural products to foreign markets, $316 million to China, more than twice what you sold in 1993 when I became president. As Secretary Glickman described, the magnitude of the Chinese market virtually defies the imagination. There are 1.3 million people in China. It's no wonder already China consumes more pork than any other nations. It is also the world's largest growth market for soybeans and soybean products. When I was governor of Arkansas back 15, 16 years ago, I used to go to Taiwan, and Taiwan was our biggest export market, they had 17 million people. And since the Chinese people are the same, if you extrapolate from 17 million to 1.3 billion, it's almost incalculable what this could mean for soybeans. The dairy consumption in China is going up as people's incomes rise. Now, that's the way they are today, with a fairly modest per capita income. It is projected that over the next 30 to 50 years, China will have the biggest economy in the world. And obviously, as the people grow wealthier and move more and more to the cities, the markets will grow. Not only because more people will be able to buy food, but the per capita food consumption will grow up. What does it mean for China to go into the World Trade Organization? It means they won't subsidize their farm sector as they used to. They're already making adjustments, planting less wheat and less cotton, for example. There's no way the Chinese farmers can keep pace with the growth of their own consumers, but America's farmers can. And Congress can give you the chance to do so, but only if it votes for permanent normal trading relations. And I want you to understand why. Because in order for the members of the World Trade Organization to let China in and then to benefit from whatever trade concessions China makes, and they've made the most in their agreement with us, every one of the members has to agree to treat China like a member. So if we don't vote for permanent normal trading relations, it's like we're saying, well, they may be in there, but we're not going to treat them like a member. And if we don't do that, what it means is we don't get the benefit of the deal I just described to you. That's what this is all about. This agreement, which we negotiated, and it's self-serving for me to say I realize that because it was negotiated by our trade ambassador, Charlene Barshevsky, with heavy input from Secretary Glickman and Gene Sperling, my national economic advisor, who was there in China with her. But it really is a 100-0 agreement economically. Normally, when we negotiate a trade agreement, we swap out, just like you do if you make a deal with somebody. Somebody said, you know, I'll give you this, and you say, okay, I'll give you that. This is not a trade agreement in that sense. This is a membership agreement. They say, if you let us into this world trading unit, we'll abide by the rules, including rules that we weren't governed by before. And in order to get in it, we'll agree to modernize our economy, which means we will drop our tariffs, open our markets, let you sell into our markets, let you invest in our markets. It is a huge deal. If you look beyond agriculture, it used to be that if we wanted to sell manufacturing products in China, they'd say, fine, put a plant here. Or if we wanted to sell some high-tech products, they'd say, fine, transfer the technology to us. Now, that's one reason we have representatives from 3M Company here. We'll be able to sell for the first time into the Chinese market, American cars, for example, without putting up auto plants and without transferring the technology. But nowhere will the benefits be greater than in agriculture. You've already heard from Dallas that export subsidies have kept American corn and other products from being priced competitively. No more. No more baseless health barriers, which China uses or has used to keep our beef and poultry outside their borders. No more high tariffs on feed grains, soybeans, vegetables, meat and dairy products. Indeed, as Secretary Glickman reminds me from time to time, when we have problems with our European neighbors and friends, the Chinese have offered us lower tariffs on some farm products than the European Union imposes today. Now, China's going to grow no matter what we do, and they're going to get in the WTO. The only issue is whether we are prepared to give up this annual review in return for the economic benefits that we have negotiated. That is the decision before the Congress. And it seems to me that it's a pretty easy decision. I think if Congress turns its back on this opportunity, we'll spend the next 20 years regretting it. And I know we'll spend the next 20 years paying for it in ways that go far beyond dollars in farm families' pockets. This is a vote for our economic security. China agrees to play by the same trading rules we do. And if we don't like it, we have two options. One is we can pursue them in the World Trading Organization mechanisms, which means it won't just be America against China, and they won't be able to say they're those big ugly Americans trying to take advantage of us. It'll be us and everybody else that plays by the same rules. But in addition to that, you need to know that we negotiated an agreement with China unlike any one we have with any other country, which says that we can go against them bilaterally, us against them, if they dump products in our market, or if for some reason, like changing currency, there's an enormous surge of their products in our market threatening to dislocate a lot of Americans. And they have agreed to let us bring action with a lower standard for proof of injury than we have in our own trade laws. Plus which we have got money set aside to monitor this agreement in greater detail than any one we've ever had. So I think it's a pretty clear issue. Now, why isn't everybody for it? Well, some people say, well, maybe they won't keep their word. Well, we have trade disputes all the time. We've got 2 outstanding with Europe still that haven't been resolved, where we just keep winning and winning. But you've got a better chance of getting it resolved with people in a rules-based, law-abiding international system than outside it. Some people say, well, they still do a lot of things we don't like. Well, that's true. But I can tell you that we'll have a lot more influence on Chinese foreign policy when it comes to the proliferation of dangerous weapons, and on human rights and religious rights and political rights in China if we have an open hand of working with them than if we say no, if we turn our backs on them. I am absolutely certain of that. And I just want to point out, that is why all of our allies in Asia, the democracies, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Thailand, these countries want us to give them normal trading status. They're very worried that we might not do this and that it will increase tensions in Asia and increase the chance of something bad happening between Taiwan and Japan and make China focus more on military buildups than building their economy and their relationships with their neighbors. That's why the president-elect of Taiwan wants us to approve this. That's why Martin Lee, who's the leader of the democracy movement in Hong Kong, a man prohibited by law from even going to China. If anybody ought to have an axe to grind, you'd think he would. He came here to America to tell the Congress they had to vote for this because that was the way to get human rights and political freedom in China, to put them in a rule-based system of international law. Yesterday, there was a detailed report in the Washington Press interviewing dissidents in China, people who have been persecuted for their beliefs. Everyone interviewed said, oh, America has got to approve this. Otherwise, America will have no influence to try to keep moving China toward democracy and freedom. You know, we get frustrated, but China's an old country and it's changing fast. 2 years ago, there were 2 million internet users. Last year, there were 9 million. This year, there will be over 20 million. At some point, you tell me, when they get to 50 or 100 or 150 million, which by then will still be barely more than 10% of their population, the country will change forever. You cannot maintain top-down control. And I think it might be interesting for you to know that not everybody in China wants us to do this. You know who's against it in China? The most reactionary elements in the military, and the people that run those old, uncompetitive, state-owned industries that want to keep those subsidies coming, that want to keep these markets closed, and that want to keep their thumb on the little folks in China. Look, this may or may not work out. I can't tell you what the future will hold. Nobody knows that, and the Chinese will have to decide what path they take to the future. All I know is this is a good economic deal, and it's an imperative national security issue, because we ought to at least get caught trying to give every chance to the Chinese to take a responsible path to tomorrow, to have a constructive relationship with this country when our children are grown, when our grandchildren are in school. We don't want a new arms race. We don't want every month in 2010 or 2020 to be calculating. See, the paper's full of stories about whether we're calculating whether we've got enough nuclear missiles against the Chinese. We ought to give us a chance. We ought to give the future a chance to work. It's a great deal for you now, But as much as I want to help the farmers here and the farmers home in Arkansas, so when I go home, they'll still let me come around, it's far more important to me to do the right thing by our national security, to give our children a chance to live in the most peaceful world in human history. And that's what this is all about. So I hope you will support David Minge. I hope you will ask your senators to vote for this. I hope you will ask the other members of the Minnesota delegation to vote for this. And I hope you will tell people that it is clearly the right thing to do economically. It is clearly the next logical step from the historic moves made in the Carter-Mondale administration in 1979. But the most important thing is it gives us a chance to build the future of our dreams for our children. People ask me all the time, well, now that you've been president 7 years, what have you learned about foreign policy? And I always tell them, it's a lot more like real life than you think. And 9 times out of 10, you get a lot more reaching out a hand of cooperation than you do shaking a clenched fist. That's what this is about. Now, if they do something that's terrible that we're offended by, we don't give up a single right here to suspend our trade relations or do anything else that any emergency conditions might dictate. All we're doing is saying, we'd like to build a future with you if you're willing to do it. And we're prepared to work over the long run. I thank you for coming here today. I ask you to recognize that this is not a foregone conclusion. I believe it is by far the most important national security vote the Congress will cast this year. And if you can do anything as an American citizen, as well as Minnesota farmers, to help us prevail, you'll be doing a great thing for our grandchildren. Thank you, and God bless you.
Well, in Arkansas, I thought he was going to move to New York.
That might have been a signal there.
Well, you get up every morning from the alarm clock's warning, take the 8:15 into the city. There's a whistle up above and people pushing, people shoving, and the girls and trying to look pretty. And if your train's on time,